everybody. Welcome to the Heart Program podcast. I'm Bill. This is Barbara, and we're with the Heart Program.
Today, we're going to be talking about how is it possible to inoculate ourselves against depression and anxiety and to be able to thrive in challenges. We'll be introducing the concept of skills-based mental wellness. It's an approach that everyone can learn, and it not only helps us get out of hole, but also climb a mountain. So let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think the first question to talk about is, what is skills-based mental wellness, and why should anybody care?
When we talk about skills-based mental wellness, we're usually comparing it to the alternative of other things that are in mental wellness. So mental health, we usually think about therapy, we think about medication, we think about suicide prevention. Those are the kinds of interventions that the mental health profession are currently working on. And, you know, when people talk about reducing stigma or what kind of activities can we do to improve mental health, those are usually the things that we talk about, getting access to therapy and preventing suicide. The reason why we're bringing this up today is to point out the controversial, possibly, idea that therapy isn't actually the solution, that suicide prevention is too late, and that really what we need to be talking about is what are the skills that we can learn and do regularly that help us build a robust mental well-being and protect us against depression and anxiety and other mental health related issues down the road. And if we are currently struggling, these skills also help us get out of that struggle. So it's kind of twofold. Skills-based mental wellness being ways that we can affect our physical body, our emotions, and our thoughts, how we can manage them and even change them to improve our mental wellness.
In a lot of ways, this sounds like having a very different set of mental models around how we think of our own mental health and approaching it from a different direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is we talk in metaphors a lot and to help people understand, and really what Barbara's talking about here is the idea of teaching people swimming lessons so that they are skillful and competent and safe and confident in the water, and so that when things happen, as they will, they can be relaxed about dealing with them. The other perspective, which Barbara's talking about a lot of the mental health world is working in today, is more of a lifeguard model, which is rescuing you after you fall into the swimming pool because you don't know how to swim.
Yeah, and you know, the lifeguard model is absolutely important. We need to help people when they are severely struggling, and yet that is not going to be the solution to addressing the mental health crisis, because it's much harder to rescue everybody than it is to prevent them from drowning.
Right.
As a metaphor.
You know, in the grand scheme of the world, nobody wants to be rescued. Everybody wants to be able to have the skills so that the swimming pool is fun and exciting, and that they can go beyond that. Yeah.
So that's that difference between, you know, lifeguards and swimming lessons.
Right. What are some kind of concrete examples that we can talk about that can help people out?
Well, earlier I mentioned the idea of being able to manage your physical body in a way that supports your mental wellness. And a lot of times we've heard people talk about breath and, you know, stress reduction and self-care and these kind of things that basically kind of make us feel better. They are very important, and they're the tip of the iceberg, because the underlying operation behind something like breath is that you're actually using this breathing exercise as a way to change the physiology of your body, to switch from being in fight-flight mode, anxiety attack, panic, scared, heart racing, all of that, to being in what we call rest and digest, which is just the opposite of fight flight, and it's what it sounds like. It's just a calm, baseline state where we can just, function in a relaxed way as opposed to being strung out and in distress. So breath has this ability, changing our breath to slow it down has this ability because of the way we're hardwired from a neuro perspective. By controlling and slowing down our breath, we actually can control and slow down our heart rate and release our muscle tension and switch our nervous system from fight, flight to rest and digest. So it's simple things like that, learning those kind of, not individual, but across pretty much all humans, characteristics or skills or strategies that can help us manage our stress response, to then realizing that, if I can notice what my physiological response is in a situation, and if I can manage it, I can interpret the situation differently. So I can affect the connection between my brain and my body. Very often we have this thing called physical anxiety, which basically means that we're physically experiencing the sensations of anxiety, which is the panic attack, fight, flight thing that I was talking about. And if we can change our view of that physical sensation to recognize that we're not actually in a life or death situation, and what we're in is more of like a, rise to the challenge, or maybe it's an exciting situation, kind of the way you'd respond to, I don't know, if you enjoy watching scary movies or going on roller coasters or doing thrill rides. Those are the kinds of things where we pay good money to experience what we think of as fight flight, but we actually interpret it as excitement and delight. And being able to switch our mindset around our physical experience of something that's nerve-wracking as something that's a growth opportunity and more positive helps us not experience the anxiety, right? We don't think of it as anxiety anymore. So it's that connection between our brain and our body that we need to learn how to gain control over and to manage. So those are some basic examples of just the physical skills of skills-based mental wellness.
Cool. There's a part of it that I was hearing there that is about having skills for impacting our neurochemistry that you mentioned. And for me, that's really powerful, because we know that neurochemical problems are the result, and a lot of pharmaceuticals are designed to get our neurochemicals back to a baseline. But it's really cool that we can actually, with our bodies, by ourselves, impact our brain chemistry without having to take pharmaceuticals. I think for me, that's one of the coolest things about this, especially because the pharmaceuticals our bodies get used to it over time, and we tend to need to up the dosage over time, which isn't the healthiest thing in the world for us. So having that built-in ability to improve our brain chemistry is awesome. It's very cool.
Yeah, so any good mental health professional will tell you that whilst medication can be extremely useful and important in critical situations, the goal is for you to develop the skills and habits that create internally your own chemistry that supports a healthy brain and mental well-being. So we have this strategy called DOSE. It's DOSE, stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And those are basically neurotransmitters that support mental wellness. They support your sense of well-being, your sense of connectedness and belonging in the world, your feeling of motivation and achievement and self-confidence and self-efficacy, like you can get stuff done and you're relaxed about it, and you're, you have like a healthy sense of, I can tolerate the distress or the stress of the situation that I'm in, and focus on problem solving, right? And not get caught up in the situation as much. So that DOSE strategy basically looks at those 4 neurotransmitters and identifies ways to improve and to release dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins.
Nice. That seems like a really easy day-to-day maintenance thing for us to be doing.
It is, and actually we can think about our resilience as sort of like a battery. We have this resilience battery that either, hopefully when we wake up in the morning, it's fully charged. Hopefully we've had a good night rest and we wake up and we're ready to go. and our battery is fully charged, and as we go through the day it kind of dwindles, and we can find ways to increase our battery charge and like sort of trickle charge it or add more energy to it over the course of the day with some coping strategies. But like you said, on a regular maintenance basis, we can actually increase the size of our battery, say go from like a AAA to a D, using the battery metaphor, by doing those kind of dose activities and increasing our reservoir, our capacity to deal with stress and distress and problem solving. So it's a way of, it's like energy management and like psychic social energy, I suppose, management.
Yeah, this is a new area. So I think oftentimes having terminology to describe it that makes sense for other people, because it's a new area in the world, we just don't have a lot of language around it. So I think the resilience battery is a good metaphor, and people can understand it easily. And they may need some definition help. Yeah, that's very cool. We all have emotions, and this is kind of a part of it. And I'm just thinking about all the times when we're doing things or we'd like to do something, but our emotions get in the way of either having the conversation or trying something out, or they hold us back from this thing that we know would be good for us to do. But in some way, shape, or form, it's scary. And so we don't approach it. How do we work with that?
So in the HEART program curriculum, we talk about emotions as being like a dashboard. They're warning lights and alarms and sort of indicators that we have an area that we need to pay attention to, not to avoid because it's uncomfortable, but actually pay attention and fix it. It's kind of like, when our baby cries, if we have a young baby, you don't ignore it because it's crying. You actually pay attention and you try and solve the problem. That's what we need to do with ourselves, with our emotions. And one of the things that emotions do is, that discomfort that we feel initially causes us to respond. And we have to stop and think, though, that sometimes the immediate response is not necessarily the right response, right? We can be impulsive and kind of set ourselves down the wrong path by just responding in a knee-jerk way, especially if we're misinterpreting the emotion. So we have to stop and think, what is this emotion? But that's hard to do when you're in the middle of it, right? If one of the skills and strategies that skills-based mental wellness promotes is this idea of wave surfing. Emotions are like chemical waves. When we experience a situation that gives us an emotion, like say somebody said something to us that really offended us, and we had this wave that came over us of, all these emotions wrapped up together. Shock, consternation, anger, maybe betrayal, or like confusion. I mean, there's just like a multitude of emotions that could come across in that initial wave. And we tend to think of ourselves as not having control over those emotions. And to a degree, we do not, especially when it's the first emotion set that we get. And going back to the idea that emotions come from a wave of chemicals, that wave dissipates in about 90 seconds. Like the bulk of it will dissipate. So if we can teach ourselves to surf the wave for 90 seconds and not respond in that first time period, and not like think about it over and over and over again, right? So if we keep thinking about that thing that set us off on the emotion to begin with, we're going to keep releasing more and more of those chemicals to have that wave keep hitting us over and over and over again, right? What we want to do is get out of the wave so we can stop and think and say, what the heck's going on here? How do I respond in a more effective way? And so surfing that initial wave, not creating additional waves, is the way we can use our skills to improve our resilience to situation and overall our mental wellness. There are a lot more skills around handling emotions in the moment, and that would be like just the first one, wave surfing.
Nice. Yeah, there's a flavor around this that is maintaining composure in situations where our emotions come up. and having confidence in our abilities as part of it, so that we don't avoid those emotions, right? Because as you said, just like baby crying, it's a really important indicator that we should be paying attention someplace. And just like with the baby, we need to know what to do. Like baby's crying, we need to know how to change a diaper, right? Or figure out how to feed them. When it's our emotions doing stuff, we need to have some other skill set, which is part of the heart program, about how do we address that and what do we do and how do we move forward. So this is a really good context for people to be aware of. One of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes we can be dogmatically fixed in our thinking processes without recognizing the possibility of other options. And an example is I recently posted a video on TikTok, and I was talking about a very different approach to interview strategies and why it works so successfully. And I noticed in the comments there were people who said, yeah, love it, I've done this, it absolutely is the best way to go. And other people who were saying, oh no, this could never work. And how do we recognize that we're making those thinking mistakes to our own detriment, right?
Yeah, that we're engaging in a self-limiting belief.
Right, exactly. Yeah, self-limiting belief. Yeah.
Well, so that's a trickier, more advanced kind of skill that involves being aware of not only physiologically what's happening in your body and how you're interpreting it, what emotions you're experiencing, but also what are the thoughts going on in your head? Can you monitor that kind of thought feed, like your Twitter feed, but it's originating from your own brain of what's hitting when you're engaging with the world. So somebody watches a video and their immediate response is, no, that's totally not possible. I don't see how that could ever work, because whatever about that situation makes it impossible, and I don't have a model for how that could work. Right. So there's this skill called catch it, check it, change it, which it's a skill for noticing when we're engaging in a self-limiting belief and how it's affecting us physically and emotionally, and from a thought cognitive perspective. It's exactly what it sounds like. You catch that you're doing it, you check whether or not it's appropriate, and typically it isn't. Appropriate is maybe not the right word. Useful, helpful, yeah, because usually it isn't. It might be normal in terms of a response to experience fear at some new suggestion, but it's not helpful in many situations. So, check it if it's helpful, and then change it. How? So it's a three-step process that involves the use of a variety of different skills in each step of the way. It's hard for people to start out with something that's really difficult for them. It's like a video game. You don't start out at level 100, you start out at level 1, baby steps. We talk about this all the time. So what's the baby step on your thinking habits that are self-limiting? The catch it is usually noticing that you're uncomfortable about something. You're experiencing some kind of strong emotional reaction that maybe is like a little bit over the top for the situation. Somebody says something to you and you respond in a flash of like super strong words, and you get this physical sensation in your body, and like maybe your eyes are bigger, or you get a flush in your face and your heart races a little bit and you get a little tense and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? That's a recognition of catching it. And we don't always notice, but that's a start of whenever we notice ourselves flaring, we can step back and say, whoa, what did I just flare about? And it could be that, somebody said something that was reasonably flary and I have good reason to be flared. And then we check it and we say, well, was the intention there? Do I even know what their intention was, given I'm not inside their brain? Can I view this situation in another light by changing my fortune telling of what I think is going to happen. Like my experience tells me, do this, this will happen, but maybe I can change that experience. Maybe there are other people who have a different experience. And if they're saying that they have a different experience, well, how is it they're doing that? That's different. So, you know, I need to check that. And then changing it is supporting yourself along the way of being open to those different ideas. It's a complex process, but suffice it to say that there are a number of skills that support you through that process. And when you start with little things, you find the things that don't get you so emotional, but get you a little bit emotional. That's a good place to start. And the thing about Catch It, Check It, Change It, and about self-limiting beliefs is that shining the light on the issue is like, yes, it's the first step, and it's a hugely important step in breaking the spell of that self-limiting belief. When we realize we're doing something in our heads that's kind of screwing us up or holding us back, just realizing that we're doing it is a huge step, because we can very often manage to pull back from doing it just by realizing that we're doing it.
Yeah, it actually, you know, as we're talking about this, I'm realizing that the starting point, the Catch It, is really a reason to have a strong understanding of our emotional dashboard, and to be able to go, this thing makes me uncomfortable. What's going on? You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That model of understanding that we're not like a candle in the wind just being blown from place to place by our emotions, but we actually have some control over our, call them secondary emotions, right? Say we experience something, but we can change how we feel about it and make our secondary emotion more useful to us. That's kind of the goal. And interestingly, over time, our initial response can actually change. Right, so that we're not experiencing that negative response, and that we actually start looking at the experience as a more positive experience.
Right. I just was thinking of an example of that. I used to be afraid of public speaking, and 5 years ago, if somebody said, "Hey, do you want to get up and speak?" I would have been like, "No, someone else should be doing it, not me," because that wasn't my comfort zone. Now, if someone says, "Hey, do you want to speak?" I'm like, "Sure, I would love to speak," because the thing that used to scare me, I went through this process and was able to flip it around, so that now public speaking is super fun. And and this is the reason why Catch It, Check It, Change It is so valuable, because when we are freed from those self-limiting beliefs, there's all kinds of opportunities in the world that we couldn't previously have gone after. So that's a really good skill to have, both for getting out of the hole as well as for climbing the mountains.
That's right.
Yeah, and I like that metaphor. So let's see, we've been in this podcast now for 30 plus minutes. Do we want to?
I think it's a good place to wrap it up.
Okay, cool, awesome.
I would say, because digestible bits, right? Not gonna make it too long.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, folks, thank you a ton for listening into our conversation about this stuff. The goal here was really to pique your curiosity a little bit and get you thinking about, what is it that I don't know about the stuff that Barbara and Bill have been talking about here. The skills we're talking about, by the way, that there's a small amount of clinical research behind it. We're building on top of the gold standard in clinical interventions, which Barbara's an expert at. And we didn't just make this up last week out of a couple of cereal boxes. There's a ton of research behind this. And it works incredibly effectively in a wide variety of context. I came into this using it professionally. And so part of the reason we talk about climbing the mountain, not just getting out of the hole, is because of how these skills help me to achieve things that my peers haven't been able to do. So hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for checking us out. And we'll be doing more of these in the future.
See you next time.